One of the first ranking videos on my channel was ranking every Mario and Luigi game. That video was made back in 2018, even though it was uploaded in 2020, and looking back, it wasn't my greatest video of all time, and I really don't agree with many of the opinions I had 3 years ago. So what better time is it to recreate an analysis ranking the games of my favorite game series, the Mario and Luigi RPG franchise. The rules are pretty straightforward. I will not include the remakes of Bowser's Inside Story or Superstar Saga this time, and this is my opinion, so without further ado, let's get started. Number 5, Mario & Luigi Paper Jam. I definitely consider Mario & Luigi Paper Jam to be, how do I put this nicely, delightfully mediocre. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't enjoy the game at all. I always loved the Mario & Luigi games, but Paper Jam is definitely the most flawed out of the 5 main games. The concept is nothing more than a selling point in my eyes, because I mean, the Paper Mario gang is all here, and you get to play as Paper Mario and fight Paper Mario enemies, but it's not the Paper Mario and Luigi blend I was hoping for. It's as if the game was made as a normal Mario and Luigi game, and last minute they just copied every entity in a paper version. There's just so many missed opportunities. I mean, for the benefit of the doubt, trio and stacked attacks are pretty cool, but how does that at all reference the Paper Mario games other than the fact that it's indeed paper? The story is kinda like a generic 2D Mario platform where Bowser steals Peach, and all the locations of the game are so bland and inadequate. All the other Mario and Luigi games have these crazy, unique, and make-believe distortional worlds that are so fun, exciting, traverse, experience unique, never seen before enemies. But Paper Jam is just grassland, desert, ice world. Rinse and repeat each one with a different mini-antagonist, and fight very generic Mario enemies such as Goombas and Koopas along the way. But hey, sometimes they're paper at least. To make the non-creativity just that much more eminent, the Koopalings are called in as pretty much a last-minute addition as a main boss. Not even in paper form, I should add. And they contribute very little to the very minimal story that's even there in the first place. This isn't to say the paper gimmick isn't good at all. The combat is as fun as ever with the addition of trio attack and a new ally to focus on when evading attacks. The Toad chases add a decent amount of replay value as well, and they're a pretty nice treat to come across. Same definitely goes for the papercraft battles, but they definitely aren't as fun as the giant battles from Bowser's Inside Story or Dream Team. But they're still a pretty neat experience, and I'm glad Nintendo experimented with something else. Some of the actual boss fights are pretty fun as well, since they require a small amount of strategizing to figure out the gimmicks of the fight, since this game's pretty heavy on boss fight gimmicks. My last main detailed nitpick in the game is definitely the music. It's the most lackluster within the series downright. It has very minimal memorable tracks that stand out as much as some of the themes in the predecessors. Mario & Luigi Paper Jam most likely will most definitely never be my preferable game in the Mario & Luigi franchise, but it's not an awful game, it just doesn't feel like enough. Number 4, Mario & Luigi Dream Team. Mario & Luigi Dream Team used to always be a game I'd idolize as a shining star in the Mario & Luigi franchise, but it took until replaying all 5 games back to back to realize it's really nothing insanely special. It was exciting to see the Mario & Luigi franchise jump to the 3rd dimension. I think Dream Team did a pretty good job of the transition, but it's just not the same as the DS and GBA titles. I'm in love with the art style of the first 3 games, and seeing that change along with the hardware was incredibly disappointing to me. Like, obviously nothing was going to stay the same, but I didn't want it to be this different. It takes a lot away from the charm, and Paper Jam also falls in this hole if I didn't mention it before. As I mentioned in my ranking every Mario & Luigi game based on music video, when the hardware upgraded the 3DS, the music was also never the same. It lost its flavor and energy. That isn't to say the game doesn't have some solid music, it's much more unique and memorable than Paper Jam's disappointing soundtrack, but nothing can really beat the spice of the first 3 games. Plot-wise, Dream Team doesn't suffer from all the holes that Paper Jam does. It introduces really cool and amazingly designed protagonists and antagonists such as Phantasma and Prince Dreambert. Some of the enemies are still kinda generic Mario enemies, but it's nowhere near as bad as Paper Jam. Like, we got some creativity here at least, we're not just fighting Goombas and Koopas. In all honesty, I admire Dream Team's plot for being so simple, yet so innovative and distincting itself from an ordinary Mario game. There's an obvious conflict and climax and goal, but all the mini-plots along the way make the anticipation to advance incredibly ratifying. The entire gimmick of the Dream World is incredibly fun as well. It takes up for Bowser's Inside Story with a 3D-esque overworld and a 2D underworld, and the Dream World opens up a new dimension of battling with Dreamy Luigi. The Luigi attacks are incredibly fun and charming to execute, and the accompanying giant battles are also really great. One thing that's definitely a minor setback is similar to Paper Jam. The areas are somewhat generic, definitely not as bad as Paper Jam, but still pretty generic. You have a bunch of different land areas you'd see in any other Mario game, but Dream Team at least provides sufficient gimmicks to spice the areas up. The problem is that the story takes you back to all these areas several times. There's hardly anything new to enjoy. There's no shock value or anything. The other main grievance in my eyes is how underwhelming the battling was in the long term. Overworld battles were as generic as they can get, aside from a few minor 3D tweaks, and the Dream World battles were incredibly underutilized and it's really disappointing. I mean, the final boss fight is entirely overworld, and it's as if the super fun Dream World battles aren't even existent. I would have loved it if it was like Bowser Inside Story, where both battle styles you learn are utilized symbiotically throughout, not only the final boss, but all the other bosses along the way. Another sore thumb and thorn in Dream Team's side is 100% the tutorial. There's over an hour of literally nothing before the gameplay begins, and when the gameplay does begin, it's just more tutorial. It caused me to be very reluctant to start replaying Dream Team again, because I had to wait so long till I get to the parts I enjoy. To wrap things up, Dream Team is definitely an amazing game, don't get me wrong, but it just goes to show that the 3DS really had no chance of being the same league as the DS and GBA Mario and Luigi titles. Number 3. Mario and Luigi Partners in Time. Here is the real turnaround from the original list. There was some minor outrage in the comments because I put this as the worst game in the franchise, and to be fair, it was a pretty dumb choice with very poor judgment. I definitely overlooked a lot of the positives of Partners in Time and focused strictly on the negatives, which didn't give the best impression of the game as a whole. One thing I do stand firmly on though is calling Partners in Time the easiest game in the entire franchise. I mean, if you find it difficult, that's not a problem. Just personally, I think the difficulty has been absolutely perfect throughout the Mario & Luigi franchise, being hard enough to break a sweat, but never hard enough to force you to grind for boss fights. But Partners in Time is just so easy because levels hardly matter since so many attacks can go on indefinitely. There's no bros power system like the other games, so you pretty much can use an infinite amount of OP bros attacks every turn, and most bosses can be taken out in one turn if you use an infinite move like the trampoline or copy flower. And the fact that you have 4 characters with 4 health bars and plenty of items to heal makes defense not an issue at all. My only other main grievance with the game is how linear it is. I mean, you can predict pretty much how every area will go through. Usually 2 screens of area, mini boss, 2 more screens of either a new area or the same area, then it ends with a bigger boss. I feel like the ambiguity of the other games makes them a lot more fun in a few ways. On my previous list, I ended the section of Partners in Time here, but this time let's discuss how awesome some parts of the game truly are. Partners in Time definitely has to be the most charming game of the series. It's so odd yet wholesome to see the babies interact with adult Mario and Luigi. And the gimmick is also used for bosses such as Bowser and Baby Bowser, and even Princess Shroob and Elder Princess Shroob in a way. I also love how diverse each setting is. You never really stumble upon a generic looking area because everything takes place in the deep past. The whole journey is centered around time travel, and it's such an interesting concept despite being so heavily used by movies and other games. Instead of a head-on threat, you fight an alien invasion by the Shroobs in the past, a time where there wasn't a Super Mario and Green Stash. This is one of the darkest timelines we've ever seen in the Mario universe. It has such a dark atmosphere and ominous soundtrack. So the whole thing of Peach being captured in the past and using the Cobalt Store in order to change the past, present, and future is really interesting. And although the battles are pretty easy, it's still really fun and unique to work with 4 different characters and 4 different buttons to press. It makes some fast-paced and brain-powered action. I definitely didn't give Partners in Time enough credit in the original video, but it's an amazing game, and I hope I did it at least a little bit of justice here. Number 2, Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga. Another major change from the original list was having Dream Team as number 2 on the list, which is kinda crazy looking back, and I give it way too much praise and focus very little on the flaws. With that little tangent out of the way, we have Superstar Saga, the game that started it all. Superstar Saga was a crazy unique game that followed in Super Mario RPG, the original Mario RPG game's footsteps, and the fact that it has very memorable characters, bosses, music, and super unique areas. Superstar Saga's bare-bone combat is perfect for the game. It's the only game that's just Mario and Luigi with no other type of battle or gimmick or anything. It's got all the precedents we know and love today. The bros attacks are super fun and satisfying to execute, the items are balanced well, and the stats are easy to figure out and fun to fiddle with. And also, counterattacking and dodging is super fun as always. The game also has remarkably memorable songs that are still fabulous to this day. I mean, one of the best presidents has to be the especially great music. I also love the plot points of this game. Cagalette and Fawful steal Princess Peach's voice and take it to the Bean Bean Kingdom to power the Beanstar, which would grant them any evil wish they desire. It takes Mario and Luigi to an entirely new world of new people, and it makes for a really great adventure. You get taken to every inch of the Bean Bean Kingdom, you see so many unique people and enemies, and it kinda feels open world despite guiding you where to go. All of the outside of battle moves also feel great to utilize and feel very useful throughout the game, which I feel like is an issue in the future games. In newer games, a lot of the overworld moves feel so underutilized and very niche. Superstar Saga is unarguably an amazing beginning to the series, considering many game series have a very rocky start and evolve over time to improve their flaws, but Superstar Saga is so great that nothing needed to be patched out and the entire formula as a whole was able to just be expanded on, not fixed. The only reason I don't believe Superstar Saga is the greatest game in the franchise is because of this. There's one game out there that has expanded from Superstar Saga so well that it's become a household name that nobody can complain about. If I had to name one flaw with Superstar Saga, all I can really think of is the difficulty curve, since it begins pretty easy, then the entire middle chunk's even easier, but then the finale is absolutely brutal, but I'm open for a challenge. The GBA art style is also amazing, as mentioned a lot. It's what the DS Mario and Luigi games are based on, and it fits perfectly with the animation and charm of all the character designs. It's almost as if Mario and Luigi should have remained in its GBA form. Well, I would be saying that if there wasn't a game I believe completely tops it. Number 1. Mario and Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. Unexpectedly, nothing has changed from my ordinary list in terms of what I think is the best of the best, the cream of the crop. Yeah, I know I go around this channel calling games masterpieces willy-nilly, but I passionately advocate Bowser's Inside Story as a shining star along Nintendo's very wide catalog of games. I feel like everything was done so perfectly. I mean, obviously, no game is flawless, but Bowser's Inside Story sure is pretty damn close. It takes such an odd concept of having Mario and Luigi travel deep through Bowser's guts, and makes it really work super well. The story brings back the famous Fawful from the adventure in Superstar Saga, and it makes him a supreme threat and one of the greatest villain arcs in Mario history. It's a compelling story that takes a simple kidnapping Peach scheme and turns it into a story of worldwide destruction with a dark star. I love how the story is super reliant on all parties. Both Bowser and the Mario Bros work together and play very important roles, which makes the gameplay even more compelling to advance through. So the gameplay revolves around Bowser brute forcing his way through the overworld in pursuit to regain his power from Fawful, while Mario and Luigi work inside Bowser to give him new powers and to pursue Peach. But like paths colliding, the stories merge and show Fawful to be the main threat, and it becomes a marathon of twists and turns. The reason I love this game so much is because it never gets stale. Even though it's a fascinating game, it gets stale if you keep rinsing and repeating, but since you can play as both the brothers and Bowser depending on the situation, the movement and combat always feels fresh, as well as the 3D areas of Bowser's overworld and the 2D areas of the bros traveling in Bowser's gut. I mean, we get some predictable settings like castles and forests, but we also get some very ambiguous settings like a respiratory system or a stomach. There's also a handful of mini-games thrown in there using niche situations, and they're always a nice treat, like a gift that keeps on giving. The combat feels very fresh with a wide variety of bros attacks, and as I mentioned, an entire new sphere of battling in the form of Bowser fights. And unlike Dream Team, there's a perfect balance between who/where you play as, and both are utilized in battle at the same time sometimes, which is always really fun to come across. The huge conclusion and climax towards the very end is so intense and dramatic that it feels like watching a thriller film, and playing through all of it feels amazing like no other game I've ever played before. I feel like it's hard for someone to gush about a game for so long, but I could go all day and night without any hesitation. But, unfortunately, that's not very great for the YouTube algorithm. All jokes aside, this is one of my favorite games of all time, hands down, and it will forever hold a place in my heart for all the reasons listed, and I encourage anyone who hasn't experienced this game, or any of the Mario and Luigi games for that matter, to play these amazing games, and I promise you, you will not be disappointed. And that wraps up our ranking video, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that. See you next time.